Welcome back here to Full Circle, Florida. Let's bring in our political analyst, Dr. Susan MacManus, and a lot to go over in this final stretch. I mean, less than 2 weeks to go before the election, the big day. The legal maneuvering over Florida's abortion amendment, that's been in the news this week here in this state. Critics have been accusing Governor DeSantis of using state resources to essentially go on a campaign against the amendment for the abortion amendment, blurring the lines of politics and governing, they say. And the governor even threatened television stations with legal action for airing a political ad. A federal judge ruled against it, and I'm just going to quote what the federal judge said, quote, "To keep it simple for the state of Florida, it's the First Amendment stupid." His words. So I guess the question is this a good use of the governor's time? I mean, the state is still literally digging itself out of hurricane debris right now.
Well, certainly the hurricane is taking the precedence everywhere. But this argument about the wording of Amendment 4 has been there since its inception, and it continues. That's one dimension. And a lot of it has to do with loopholes, and each of them accusing the other one of not having a word that's clearly specified to who's looking at the amendment. The second thing is, though, it's not unusual. Presidents, all chief executives, governors, they're elected with a party label after their name, and they say that they're in favor of this policy, and it gets, then the party pushes for it. So in that sense, it's not at all unusual.
Is it personal?
But certainly.
Yeah.
This is one of the focal points of a lot of voters is Amendment 4.
Well, and is there something with the governor that this is more, he's personally invested in this since he did sign this law? Does it make him look bad if voters overturn it? They would need 60%, obviously, but that would be kind of a mandate.
Well, more likely it looks like that he's just doing what the Republican Party, wants done, and it's going on what the party is advocating.
Let's talk strategy here. Marco Rubio went on the radio this week and said that Donald Trump and Rick Scott, that all they need to do is keep the margins close in South Florida, in Miami-Dade, in order to win the state in those respective races, the presidential and, of course, the statewide Senate race between Mucarsel, Powell, and Rick Scott. His point being that South Florida is no longer blue, that it is more pink. And I'm just wondering, in terms of a lesson learned from the state Democrats, are they still that heavily dependent on South Florida to carry them? A
lot, because they have a huge concentration of registered Democrats. So Broward and Miami-Dade, big counties, lots of Democrats. But more importantly, and this was sort of what Rubio was getting at, it has a large Hispanic population, and a sizable portion of them are no party affiliation. So that's what he's talking about, because they know that they're sort of making inroads in with the Latinos. But to credit the Democrats, they are running candidates in every legislative seat.
For the first time in a long time.
Same thing with Congress.
Yeah.
They know that they've got to do better across the state, but that was what Rubio was referring to, is the mixture of keeping down the Democratic vote by appealing more to the Latinos, who are a lot of NPAs plus their own
You do
party.
well in South Florida, you win the state. Well, reports out this week from early voters that people are getting confused on these amendments, specifically Amendment 4. One voter said that the impact statement that's attached to the ballot that you would read when you're voting says, quote, "The proposed amendment would result in significantly more abortions." Now, he said, he raised the question in this report, how would anyone know that, this voter? And isn't that misleading, or at least injecting bias into the ballot? Why not just state the facts? Could that have a difference in how people vote, or have they already made up their mind before they go to the polls?
Well, a lot of people don't read that impact, but we have to be clear. There's very, very clear state law on the three components of an amendment that's on the ballot. First of all, the ballot title. Secondly is the description of what that amendment's doing. And the co-sponsor of the amendment, this was put on the ballot through citizen petitions, and the group that was the sponsor was Protecting Florida's Freedom. That group was responsible for the language of the overall, what it's going to do. The third one, which is what the person is talking about, the financial impact statement, is also required by law because it requires a close look at what impact any change that's in the Constitution is going to have on the state's budget, its revenues and expenditures. And it's written by 4 people that generally have an economics background.
Do you think, though, that people have kind of locked in how they're going to vote when they go in there into that ballot? and they've got those dividers up, or are they still sort of conflicting with themselves which way to go? And do they actually read the ballot language? And just to go over kind of the details, like you're closing the deal?
The bottom line is, I guarantee you there are very, very few percentage of people who actually go into the voting booth and read the fiscal impact statement. Many have their minds made up. Why? Because these are such high-profile amendments, 3 and 4. You can't turn to any media without being bombarded with what they're about.
Any chance the Republican supermajority could weaken in the state of Florida in this election? Are there vulnerable districts that could alter the balance of power, particularly in the state house?
Not really, even though Democrats themselves have identified 16 House seats that they're really going to try to gain and make some headway in. Other sort of handicappers nationally that look at it identify 11. Only one of them is in this area, District 60. But the bottom line is that if you really look at what Democratic leaders are saying is, and they feel proud that they've fielded a candidate in every one of them, their thought is, okay, maybe we don't get it would take them to flip 5 net seats to overturn the supermajority. Even if we don't get to that, their thinking is, we can make headway, we've got to take giant steps, and this is the year that we have to start taking a giant step towards closing the gap between us and Republicans.
And just to be clear, for folks who don't necessarily know what a supermajority is, the Republicans would still have a majority, so they would still essentially control the agenda, but the supermajority makes it almost impossible for the Democrats to have a voice in crafting legislation. That's been their main point of condition. But you know, at the end of the day, it's up to you as a party to put people, give people a choice and be competitive.
Right, and you also have to realize that you could take money, and Democrats are the Democratic Party of Florida is heavily underfunded compared to the Republican Party of Florida.
All right, Dr. MacManus, thanks for being with us. We still have final thoughts on the week that was and a look at the pivotal week ahead as we enter the final stretch of the 2024 presidential election. Stay with us.